All right, Tim, let's talk about buying investment property. I think everybody has this idea in their mind. You buy investment property, you save up 20%, you buy this house, and then you rent it out, maybe make a couple $100 a month. And then in 30 years, you now have this asset that you can use into your retirement, or you're using it to supplement your income. Maybe you're making $300-400 a month. And that's kind of how most people look at it. And there's some formula that says this. And I would also speculate that most people, most rentals are probably people who chose not to, for some reason, sell their house. Either they didn't have enough equity in it when they had to move, a lot of military people, or for whatever reason, they thought it'd be a good idea to keep it as an investment. A lot of people, the majority of the people that I talk to that own rentals are rental owners, not by their first choice. It wasn't like they saved up the money to buy it. What do you think about that?
I think you're totally wrong. And what I mean by that is I think people have looked at real estate differently today. They're taking a different approach to it. People are being more aggressive. And I think, honestly, the rents have gone up so dramatically higher. There's such a severe shortage of rental properties on the marketplace. And I think people recognize real estate as a great investment. It's a passive investment. It's ongoing. There's amazing tax benefits. And you're right, at the end of the day, it's free and clear. So let's take your same image. Someone bought a house and then kept it and bought the next house. And in 30 years, that's paid in full. Well, Brian, they're not making $300 or $400, right? In 30 years?
No, they're making $3,000. And it's a great idea. But I think the challenge for many people and why they don't necessarily think about buying investment property is they have to come up with this 20% down in order to make $300 a month. And that is a reasonable calculation. If you buy a house and, with the cheapest most affordable houses in the Washington, D.C. area, I think, is Lusby, Maryland. They're probably $300K for an average house, right? And your rent's going to be maybe $2,000 a month. Your mortgage is also going to be $2,000 a month. So it's not like there's not this huge profit margin built into it intrinsically, I think.
So I think you're right from the initial traditional investment strategy, but you and I both know that's not the only way to buy investment property. Let's just call it what it is. People,
let's go
traditional, right? And let's jump into the other pieces, man.
Yeah,
let's talk about the other ways that people buy. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So number one, yes, people are buying primary residences. We got a lot of younger folks today doing that, but they're also what's called house hacking. So they're buying a house, and I got clients right now buying a house in Centerville. It's a 6-bedroom, 4.5-bath house. You're gonna laugh. They're doing a USDA loan, no money down. It's their primary residence. Okay, but I know, and they're gonna probably end up renting out some of those houses in the process. And so they're gonna buy the home, they're gonna live in it. It's their primary residence, and they may end up doing what's called house hacking, which is renting out rooms at a set rate, and they may end up renting out 3, 4, 5 bedrooms in that house. So not only do they have it as a primary residence, but now they're collecting, let's use $800 a month, right, for renting each of those rooms. 5 times 8 is $4,000, Brian. So that's not traditional investing, but that's a great way to get started, recognizing the need, right?
So the advantage to that scenario is you don't need to, because you're renting out rooms within your primary residence, you don't need to use an investment loan.
You don't need an investment loan or investment vehicle to make the purchase, because you're really doing it through a primary residence purchase. And that's, Brian, that's the best way. And
so a little like angle on that is, and this is another one that you and I have discussed recently, is instead of a person buying a house or a husband and wife buying a house, what about 2 unmarried people that are going to live there together, but not necessarily as a couple, but more as like an investment strategy? Like me and you buy a house, maybe we're young, 22 years old. And it's like, well, we could either rent together or we could pay the same amount of money, buy a house together, and then we'll rent out the basement. And our rent goes from $1,000 a month down to $200 a month, and we're also making money.
And I think you nailed it there. Because of the severe shortage in rentals, we are seeing a lot of younger folks getting together, two friends, guy,
Right.
girl, 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 guy, it doesn't matter, right? But they're putting the resources together. They're using one of the very low down payment programs. They're buying it as a primary residence. They're getting a heck of a better interest rate, a heck of a better set of standards, guidelines to get into the home. They've got minimum investment, and then they're turning around renting some rooms. So I think house hacking is non-traditional investing.
Right.
It's stage number one. Let's talk about stage number two. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So stage number two is I've got clients who just bought a house in Annapolis. And literally what they're going to do is they're going to rent out their house, ready, for basically 3 to 4 weeks out of the year, just 3 to 4 weeks, when the midshipmen have their grad week. Okay, so that's number one, the graduation week. They got their midterm week. They got their boat show week. They got sailboats, motorboats. So we're talking about 4 weeks. Now, here's the wild part. You ready? Their townhouse that they just bought will rent close to $3,000 for a week. So in 4 weeks, they're going to make $12,000.
We saw, you and I worked together on a deal, and I can't remember, what do they call that when the midshipmen are graduating? There's that week. There's some
it's Navy week. It's graduation.
Coronation, I think they call it. So that, I remember she said she was getting $6,000 for her house. Now, she obviously had a big house.
Sure.
But you're right. Everybody in Annapolis, every hotel within 50 miles is rented out, and people are Airbnb in their houses during that time and getting a premium. So you're absolutely right about that.
So freeze with that idea. Now my client's going to make $12,000. Their mortgage payment is $2,000 a month.
That's 6 months of mortgage paid.
Yeah, and again, a non-traditional investment. Now let's lead that into the idea of, you love this idea, right? Airbnb, vacation rentals.
Yeah, so think about this, Tim. I always thought about this. Like, I have like a vacation style home. The home I live in was actually purchased. It was built as a vacation home. It's not a great layout. I was always thinking, what if I go on vacation and while I'm gone for 2 weeks in Florida, I rent my house here for 2 weeks, and I'll pay more in Florida than I'll get here, but I'll get at least half, right? I get half my vacation covered.
I would be shocked if you don't get more on vacation rentals. It is unreal. And Brian, you and I talk about that.
Where we stay is a little rich,
but we have clients that have, basically rented out their home, and let's face it, they've acquired a property, it was their primary residence, and then they've said, you know what, I want to buy another primary residence. So they've converted their house to a rental, right?
Yeah, so that's another one that I think is pretty genius. That I don't know what you call that, but that is where you basically buy a house, and when you buy another home, instead of selling it, you rent it.
Right.
And then, Tim, you can maybe speak to this.
So
you have to have a lease in place.
Yep.
And then
deposit.
What's that?
And an earnest money deposit check, show that it's legit.
Right.
And then literally I can use 75% of that rental income to offset the mortgage. Yes. And I go with a conventional purchase with 5% down. So now I bought my second home.
So what if you had a conventional on your existing? Could you go FHA on the new one, 3.5% down, or USDA? You can't, because you can only have one house.
Right. You can't go USDA. Take it out of the equation. You could go FHA, but you can't count the rental income on the new lease. It's got to be.
What about VA then?
VA, all you need is a lease, dude. That's huge too.
So if you're VA eligible, you can buy a house, and then instead of, and I mean, people do this again mostly because they didn't have an option to sell it, because they end up getting orders way before they intended to.
Right.
And back in the day, equity was going down, not up. So so then you can use 75% of your rental income as your income to help balance out your debt to income ratio on your loan application with Tim. And then your debt doesn't show the entire mortgage. You're not carrying two mortgages. If you get a new mortgage, you're carrying one mortgage plus 25% of another mortgage, assuming you're renting it out for. Now, what if you rented it out for way more than your mortgage? Would you theoretically be able to cover the whole mortgage? So it's 75% of the rent.
Correct. So let's take, for example, let's say your mortgage payment was $1,500. You collected $2,000. We take 75% of that $2,000 rental income. It's 1,500. We offset the other 1,500, and
Yeah, now you're at zero. So now you
Huge.
basically have no mortgage counting against, and then you can turn around and buy another house.
so
And
so let's freeze. So
yeah,
you've taken me from house hacking, non-traditional. You've
right,
taken me to, temporary weekly rentals during special occasions.
right.
Now you're taking it to creating another rental property through an acquisition with only 5% down the next house. Again, non-traditional. Now let me throw a hanger in there. You ready? Get a home equity line on the first house before you turn it into a rental. And now you've got your down payment for your next house.
Yeah, amen on that. That's perfect.
So again, non-traditional. So now, Brian, we've gone house hacking, we've gone weekly rentals, we've converted to a regular rental, and now we're going to do, let's talk about it, Airbnb, baby.
Hold on. I got one more really quick. I'm thinking about this in my head. You're sitting on a 3% interest rate and you don't want to sell it. And you're like,
Why would
man,
you?
you know what? I got equity in this thing. I don't want to sell it, but
Yeah.
I want to move. And I don't feel like dealing with, all this nonsense. I'd really like, to keep this house. Not refinance, home equity line out the down payment on the new one, and you can still keep your low interest rate, which will probably have solid rental income, because rental income has gone way up. House prices have gone up. You can protect your equity, still buy another house, and the interest rates on home equity lines are usually like 2, 3, 4%.
Actually, no, they're higher. I mean, it's prime.
Are they really?
Yeah, it's prime plus 1, 2.
Well, prime used to be 0. So last time I looked into it, it was like
prime's like 4.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah. So it's still worth it though, because you're still paying less than what you are on your mortgage, because your mortgage is now 6 something ish.
So Brian, what you've done is you've taken some of the soldiers, some of that equity in the first house. Now you're putting those soldiers to work on the next purchase. You might not have, you might have just enough. You might even have more equity that you borrow for another house, right?
Yeah.
And then first house, turn it into an Airbnb.
Yeah, let's talk about Airbnbs. This is something that is fascinating to me. I talk to a lot of people. I've met a guy who Airbnbs boats next to a bar that he owns. Like, he was buying this boat that didn't even run barely.
Right.
In Baltimore, and he drove it to Wilmington, North Carolina at 4 miles an hour. Like, it was limping down the bay. Him and this dude, you could tell they drank a whole entire case of wine the night before. They couldn't even see straight. Sure. And he was on a 3-day journey to take this boat back. And he's like, all I need to do is get it to the dock out of it or whatever.
Right.
And then he said he Airbnbs a tent on a beach on one of these barrier islands. Again, he's in Wilmington. So he went to a barrier island, and I don't know if it's legal, but he set up a tent, the whole thing. Sure. And he would drive you out there, and he would charge $150 per person and drop you off. So I also see, and this is what I personally look for when I want to go to an Airbnb, I would prefer a primitive setting. Like, I would prefer like outside, no neighbors, can't see anybody, living in the woods for a couple of days of serenity. Because I just got back from Arizona, and that's what I was looking for. But there's one on the Eastern Shore. There's very few like that. And you could buy, and there's a house in St. Leonard right now for $119,000. It's in the woods. It needs all kinds of rehab. But instead of going rehab it up with laminate and tile and ceramics and granite and all this, why not go primitive? Just build it back up to where it's sturdy, keep it primitive, and then you could probably get $200-300 a night for people who just want some peace and serenity.
And so now you nailed it. You've taken the concept, you've gone non-traditional on us, man. You're like, somebody out there, a primitive native, who've taken a totally different approach.
Well, the thing is, people assume that Airbnb is like something you do in Florida or something you do in a place like maybe North Beach and Chesapeake Beach. I know a lady who's got a basement in La Plata in just some random neighborhood. And she was like, yeah, I have traveling nurses come here all the time. I have interns coming here all the time. I have people that are studying, and they're on a job application. Airbnbs are housed for weeks at a time, days at a time, sometimes months at a time. And they have a separate outside entrance. And she's getting like hundreds of dollars a night to rent out her basement. And then I know another lady who's got a house broken up into 3 separate rentals. She has an in-law suite that she rents for $200 a night. She has a basement she rents for $800 a night. And this is luxury area and all this. But the main floor rented for $1,400 a night during prime season. We're talking like these people make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of these Airbnbs. And to your point, Tim, what if you just Airbnb'd your house for 1 or 2 months out of the year and it covered 6 months or 12 months of your mortgage?
Year.
And you were able, let's say you take your camper to the campground for a month and you just live out of your camper for a month while you rent your house out and it covers your mortgage for a year. And maybe in that scenario, you take on a bigger mortgage than you really feel comfortable with, but now you're able to live in a much nicer house because you're hacking, you're not living in it for one of the months. I mean, I know that's not the ideal scenario, but there's just like you said before, there's a lot of ways people are looking at how to buy houses and how to kind of get through situations. I got a guy right now wants a bunch of land and he's struggling with how much house prices cost. And I was like, man, listen, this house that I was looking at, it has like a thing on it that you could easily turn into an Airbnb. There's no HOA. It's like, come on, just, you got to think outside the box a little bit.
Which I think you just nailed it, Brian. Yeah, and I think people are taking a different approach. They really are. They're looking at the non-traditional approach saying, okay, how can I go take it to the next step? And if you look at just the one you talked about, okay, so I have a teacher that I'm talking to right now. Teachers work typically September 1 through May 31st, right? And I said, what could you do for June, July, and August? What do you normally do? And she said, I normally go and travel. And I said, why don't you do Airbnb your house for June, July, August? And it blew her mind. So, I mean, to the degree that I'm actually teaching a class in a month on Airbnbs. But my point of the matter is, Brian, the opportunity are amazing. It really is.
So, Tim, what do you think? And this is my opinion. I think the biggest challenge to this whole thing is people are just very uncomfortable with new thinking, new ideas. Like it's like, and it's not the millennials. It's everybody who's older than the millennials. The idea that you're going to travel and then rent your house while you're gone. I don't know. When I grew up, I knew nobody who rented their house. Like their primary residence. I sleep here, my family. Like that seems weird. But if you think about it, like you take your jewelry, you lock it up, whatever, there's nothing in my house that's weird. So it would be a fantastic idea. I mean, I think people just have a hard time with, I don't know about that. It seems weird. I don't know if I want people in my house. And I get all that. But if we're really trying to just figure out how to accomplish a goal, houses now cost a lot more than they used to. What are some ways we can buy a primary residence or an investment property without 25% down or 20% down?
And we just nailed it. But let's talk about the last little piece. A self-directed IRA. What about using your retirement now to buy rental properties? And we've talked about that. People want to know, I've got my money in the stock market. The stock market goes up. The stock market comes down. Right. We really don't have a good, idea of where things are. And my point, that's another angle. Again, I like real estate. You know that. I own a bunch. That's my philosophy. And I live and believe and do exactly what I talk about. So I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, if I take my investment and create it into a self-directed IRA, and if it was a Roth, I don't even pay taxes on the profit, Brian. I mean, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
But if it's not a Roth, I'm deferring the taxes until I start drawing all that money down long term. In 30 years, it's paid in full. Again, I have a massive income producing property, right? So, and then we get into 1031 exchanges. I mean, Brian, I love this concept because there's so many ideas and so many ways that we can approach this. There's no question about it.
And I think that's the kind of thing is most people assume 20% down, make $300 a month, deal with terrible
with the headaches.
And that's another one where I also have a lot of solutions, like personally. Like there is a website, can't even remember what it is, but it's tied to one of these credit bureaus, and you make everybody who's 18 who's going to live in the house pay $40. That's going to get away anybody who's just trying to like give you some song and a dance and a sob story. $40 per applicant. It does background checks, previous rental history. It does a credit check. It doesn't give you the credit score, but it tells you good, bad, acceptable, not acceptable. It uses their income,
Yep.
based against what they owe to give you just a score on whether or not they're any good or not. And then you can call their references. There's ways to protect yourself from bad tenants. And I think most people, they get sucked into, hey, my friend wanted to rent this house and it didn't work out. You know, that's not the way to do it. You want to have everybody go through a process and screen people. There's ways to protect yourself through that. You can even charge 2 months, up to 2 months for your security deposit. So if you got a $3,000 a month rent, you give them a $6,000 security deposit. That's going to cover most damage to a house. You know, make sure you document everything. But to your point,
right? You just nailed it.
Yeah.
$3,000 first month. That's $9,000,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm adding the dollars.
Yeah, people don't know renting is expensive.
It is.
Yeah.
So Brian, man, I'm excited. I'm like, oh man, look at some more rental properties, right? I mean,
yeah, no, I think the theme here and what I was trying to get to, and I was rambling on, is call Tim and just say, hey, what are some ways we can do this, and just let somebody else who's maybe an expert help you think outside the box. I think the main advice I would have is, if you have any interest in investment property, let's have a conversation. What do you think? I actually called a guy the other day and I was like, I've helped him sell a couple houses and I know how he handles things, and he has control over his situation well. And he understands what people are looking for. He just has a good grasp on real estate. And I was like, man, listen, you need to get an Airbnb. You need to get an Airbnb. You're going to be able to do this. And so that's what I would suggest is, if you have any interest in doing this, give Tim a call and say, hey, help me figure out a plan. Let's talk about some different ways we can do it. And it's not necessarily 20% down of your hard-earned money to make $300 a month.
Amen, brother. Let's make some money, man. I'm ready.
All right, Tim. Thank you, sir.
See you soon.